to another edition of the Dallas Housing Coalition's Housing for All webinar series. My name is Andrea Gillespie, and I'm back as your host of this series. I also serve as Senior Manager of Community Development at Charles Schwab Bank and a board member for the Dallas Housing Coalition. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. On each episode of the Housing for All webinar series, we discuss whether Dallas is big and if it is truly big enough for everyone by having impactful conversations with members of the Dallas Housing Coalition and other community leaders who are Dallas's strongest advocates for keeping the city affordable. Joining us this morning is Norma Nelson, President and CEO of Readers to Leaders. With over 8 years of experience as the Readers to Leaders CEO, Norma has fostered relationships and opportunities through the nonprofit's tutoring and coaching programs that are aimed to give Dallas students opportunities to thrive as readers and leaders. Through her leadership, Readers to Leaders has grown to serve more than 1,600 students in the Dallas Independent School District and was named one of 5 finalists in the United Way of Metropolitan Dallas's Social Innovation Accelerator program in 2019. Norma holds a Master's of Education and a Bachelor of Arts degree focused in elementary education, political science, and theater from the University of Notre Dame. Norma, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrea. I'm so glad to be here and thankful to be a part of this important work with you all.
Well, we love to hear that. And I will just join in, just jump into the conversation by just asking if you can share, especially for our viewers today that are not as familiar with your organization, please share with us the mission of Readers to Leaders and how literacy plays a crucial role in empowering children from under-resourced communities in Dallas.
Definitely. So the mission of Readers to Leaders is to equip students for success through the power of reading. And we like to think that we do that in 2 key ways. So as our name suggests, we work with readers and we work with leaders. So I'll kind of break that down a little bit. So as far as our readers, we provide high impact, high dosage tutoring to kids across 8 different locations. That includes 7 Dallas ISD schools, as well as what we call our Booktown after school program and summer camps. And by high dosage, we mean that students are getting, 90 to 120 minutes a week, sort of a deep dive in those early literacy and those key foundational skills. And then we also work with leaders. So we are coaching teachers as well as nonprofit professionals across 7 sites this year. And then we also have a program called Family Reading Cohort, where we actually work with parents to teach them these foundational literacy, really important topics and things that they need to know, as well as how to break down the words to help their students with their reading. So those are some of the things that we do. And why is it important? So as we all know, reading and early literacy is a foundational skill. And Commit actually just released our 2023 scorecard, and 43% of students in Dallas County did not meet state standards in reading by the end of 3rd grade. So a lot of people know how few of our students are actually meeting those standards that are so important. But if you look at it from an equity perspective, and especially from a racial equity perspective, we also are seeing differences when we disaggregate that data. So if you peel back the layers on that a little bit, among white students, 66% of students are meeting that 3rd grade goal. For Latino students, it's 37%. And for our African American students, it's 35%. So we definitely have an issue when it comes to equity and how do we bring equitable resources. And a lot of this aligns to, kind of the issue we're going to touch on more today, which is housing, and how we know that's at the root of a lot of our challenges there as well. So we see those numbers align, across both the education space as well as the affordable housing. What happens? I mean, we know that, if low-income students who don't read on grade level by the end of 3rd grade, if they can't do that, they're 6 times more likely to drop out of school. And that has, negative effects on them as people and on their agency and their ability to thrive, as well as our broader Dallas community. And it plays directly into housing. since affordable housing, again, we want to build folks up, build students up, and our young people up to have the resources they need to have the agency and the ability to be able to get into affordable housing, pairing with those policies that make that housing more available. So that's just a little bit about Readers to Leaders, but I'm very excited again to be here today because I do think there's a lot of connection between these two topics.
Norma, thank you so much for doing such a wonderful job of providing the 30,000-foot view of the mission of your organization and then really drilling down to how that looks and feels in the real world context. And you touched on housing in your comments, and I definitely want to get back to that in a second. But before that, I'm just curious if you can share how literacy success that children have, how does that benefit the broader Dallas community?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways, but one of the things, and we know that this is again a commit aligned goal, is that we want to get people ready for a career and to be able to, put food on the table, provide for their families, be able to get into that job market and be able to, um, be actively contributing to our economy, right? And so that means that we are working together to set people up for success, and that through an education that we are going to give people the tools to do that. But I also think, just personally, there's a lot about reading and literacy that gives you the ability as a person to be able to learn, to grow, to be to be a voter, to distinguish between fact and opinion. If you can read, then you can unlock so many things that are going to make you just an amazing and contributor into our society, into our city, into our community. The other thing is with education, obviously if we're in a job that, if we don't get the education that we need, it's going to be harder to get into the jobs that do pay better or that will provide better supports. When folks can't think about, kind of more broadly about their futures, and they're really thinking about the day to day, like if they don't have transportation, if they don't have if they don't have affordable housing, if they don't have these things, it's going to be really tough for them, and they're going to be living, kind of that one crisis away that we hear a lot about, for example, in KRAs, and a lot of good reporting on that. We want to get people out of that cycle so that they can be engaged in our community, but I think on a deeper level, so that as humans, they can have the ability to enjoy and live a full life. And education provides a pathway to doing that.
Thank you. I mean, what I'm struck by what you've just shared with us today is that reading is fundamental. It sounds like it's a fundamental building block of life and community, not just in terms of student achievement, but just how a community functions and stays informed and makes decisions. So thank you for sharing that with us. And now I do want to go back to the issue of housing instability, which I'm so glad you touched on that in your opening remarks. And I'm just curious if you can share in what ways housing instability or the lack of affordable housing impacts the students and families that you serve through Readers to Leaders.
Yeah, definitely. So there are a lot of elements about this, and some of them are we think about them, they make sense, they're kind of top of mind. But even if you dig into some of these adjacent things that may come up relating to affordable housing, and I did a little research myself, and because I knew some of this, and even as a teacher, when you have kids in the classroom, we want our students to be ready to learn. We teach a very specific body of knowledge at Readers to Leaders, which is mostly around really functional literacy. So decoding, fluency, phonetic principles, right? We're really teaching kids how to break apart a word and put it together. We have a fancy term in reading. It's called the science of teaching reading. That's gotten a lot of reporting as well. I really recommend this podcast called Sold a Story if you're interested in learning more about reading, how it's taught in the US, and why so many kids struggle with reading. And a lot of it actually has to do with how teachers are equipped to teach reading. But one of the elements that really plays into it is the student ready to learn? Are they coming to school um, really able to accept that teaching and that knowledge, or are they thinking about other things? So I'll break that down a little bit. So one of the issues is, as we know, ready to learn, we need food, we need shelter, we need stability. Kids need that, adults need that, right? They need to be at school. I know that sounds like very elementary, but it's the truth. And mobility or student transience is going to be a big challenge, obviously, to getting the education they need. Even if they have a great teacher, if they're out of school and they're, learning, they're in this unit of study and they, have to move all of a sudden because of housing instability, they might miss or, have be skipping around in the knowledge where they go to a new school. Now they're learning different things. Maybe they're, in another unit in that curriculum. And so they miss key elements that they needed. So anytime a child changes schools for any reason that isn't grade promotion, we call that transience or mobility. And it's going to be higher for children who are struggling or whose families are struggling with housing instability. So a few just sort of facts on this. Young children who move 3 or more times before pre-K, they are going to have the most severe negative consequences. And some of this research is from Habitat for Humanity. And it's really telling us that, the more that young child moves, especially before those pre-K years, that's going to be a struggle for them as they go into school. And that's lining up to those negative outcomes, health and education outcomes. So that's one thing. Our child, we have tutoring, right? And I was just on a staff meeting before this, and we were talking about doing makeup sessions, right? Because maybe the students are not there. There might be a schedule change at the school or things like that. But we can have the greatest resource in the world. If the child is not there to receive that resource, then that's going to be a problem. So our schools can be equipped. They can have teachers supports. They can have a great new curriculum. But if there's transience or student mobility and the child is moving around and is not in school, that's going to be an issue. The second has to do with health. So let me kind of link the affordable housing to health. So one of them is respiratory health, which I know is something you're like, how does this all tied? Well, 39% of asthma diagnosis, which is a very common diagnosis for a lot of our students, under 6 are preventable. If you address things like mildew, poorly working stoves and heaters, dander, and things that tend to be more present in a housing situation that's more compromised or that's not meeting the needs of the family. Lead poisoning. So 2.2% of children living in poverty have high lead levels. We know that lead levels can also have negative outcomes on IQ and student achievement. The general population is 0.6%. So when we think about things like environmental justice, if we have students, for example, at Readers to Leaders, we are in West Dallas, Singleton and Hampton. We're actually housed in the Habitat for Humanity building there. But we have a lot of industrial in a long history in West Dallas of industry. And heavy industry is going to have negative effects in a lot of different ways on housing and on compromising the housing situation, even the air we breathe, right? So we're talking about children that may be outside in an industrially zoned location, and they will come down with asthma. We have the highest rates of asthma. And so all this is kind of tied together. And it's also tied to zoning and a few other things. The last thing I'll talk about is underhousing and crowding. So if students are in situations where there's underhousing and crowding, which is often the case when there's compromised affordability, there's going to be things like a lack of privacy. So think about the Zoom, how it all grew during COVID, and we were all on our computers. Well, if we have family members around, if we have kids around, if we have grandparents around, not that we don't love having our loved ones there, but that can make it challenging for kids to study, to do their homeworks. They may they may have a loud study environment. They may also have sleep disturbances or things like that. All of those things can line up to the student coming into that classroom and not being ready to learn, right? So although these things, again, on the surface, we don't always think about these things, but they all do tie into that overall student's ability to even get the learning. And what we have found is that when we, go into schools or kids come to us, if they don't have the basics, if they don't have food, if they don't have shelter, if they don't, and if these things also aren't adequate, so if they don't have healthy food, or if they don't have a living situation where there's not crowding or a mildew problem, right? So they may have housing, but is it really meeting their needs? Or are there challenges? The child comes to school, they won't be ready to learn, even with the best program. That's going to still be a challenge for them.
Norma, mic drop, first off. I mean, news, yeah. I mean, I love the way you painted the intersection between literacy, school readiness, and housing instability, from all of these different vantage points that I think a lot of us don't even think about, but make so much sense. And the first point that you raised is the most important thing that we can do is make sure our students are at school, are in tutoring programs, or where they need to be, where the resources are available to help them achieve. And if their families are dealing with things like, we just got an astronomical increase in our rent, what are we going to do? We can't stay here. Then you can already see the ripple effect that that's going to create. Um, for a child being able to go to the tutoring program, school on a consistent basis. And then just as the others issues that you brought up with respiratory and how that impacts learning, especially if a family has to make a choice between affordability and quality. I can see that coming into play when it comes to housing. And then the issue of like doubling up, overcrowdedness, lack of privacy. I still struggle after school with my son here, and I'm on a call and he busts into the office, my home office. So I can only imagine if we were just in a living area of a living room, a bedroom, and a kitchen, how difficult that would be to focus on learning, doing homework, things of that nature. So just so appreciate you drawing such a very compelling through line between school readiness, literacy, and housing instability. And just want to continue the conversation. I could spend just time here all day just on that. But I'm curious, how readers to leaders, when you sense a family is struggling with housing, and I'm sure you see it based on attendance, lack, the effort the student is able to put in into what they're learning. How may readers to leaders help them deal with these issues that is impacting the learning that you're able to do with them?
Definitely. So I would say, from the start, one of the things that we do, for example, I'll just talk about our after school program and our camps. So affordability is absolutely key. You are going to pay, it used to be you could pay $50 an hour for tutoring. Now it's more like 100 an hour or more, depending on what type of tutoring it is. So private tutoring and getting support for kids that do need extra help with their schoolwork and with these skills is really out of reach for the vast majority of parents. But as we've seen the housing affordability continue to be an increasing challenge, especially in Dallas over the last 10 to 15 years, that's the stuff that those become the nice to haves that really go right off. So right as the parents and as parents are looking for their home or their rent, or trying to get the funds to pay for those basics, right? Paying the grocery bill, we've got inflation, we have all the rents going up, and let me also say that we have middle income earners that 15 years ago, I was a teacher. I bought a house on my own. I bought it on my own, and I couldn't do that now. I could not. If I was a teacher today, I would have to live an hour away, or I would have to. It just wouldn't be the same. And I remember at the time, because I was a teacher, I was eligible for a bank program called Community Heroes that helped people get into homes basically and make that easier and more accessible. But I don't know to what level programs like that exist. But we're talking about a police officer, nurses, teachers. We have so many people in these fields where housing affordability has completely changed since I purchased a home. I think it was about 13 years ago. And I have a commute, like I drive, I live in Far East Dallas, because even when I did buy a home, that long ago, it was already that I had to drive quite a bit to kind of meet my budget, right? So I understand being on a budget especially from my days in education. Um, so that's one of the things that we do is the after school program that we have, it's $45 a month. But if the student attends the program and doesn't miss more than 3 days a month, they get to carry that $45 over as a deposit. And if they maintain good attendance, they don't have to pay it again the next month. Now,
Okay.
if families have challenges with even with paying the $45, of course, we'll help them. It's important to have buy-in, and it's important for us. It helps with attendance as well. But we're not charging what a normal, I would say, childcare or after school program is charging, right? We're charging heavily discounted rates because we have community support for the programs. When your child is struggling, if you go to a Sylvan Learning Center or come on, or some of these that you see in the neighborhoods, again, those are not accessible to families right now that are just struggling to pay the rent, struggling to keep their mortgage going, struggling to pay those grocery bills. So without a Readers to Leaders, there's really not an option for tutoring, for private tutoring for the vast majority of our families. And that's something that we can offer. Now,
Mhm.
what do we do if a student is struggling with a lack of affordable housing and we find out about a difficult situation? The good news is that we're very deeply connected to our partners, particularly our West Dallas partners. So, like I mentioned, our office is actually located. We co-locate there with Habitat for Humanity. So it's really nice because 2 doors down, we have a partner that we can refer the family to. But we also have wonderful organizations like Wesley Rankin Community Center that has helped families, for example, work on their work on their taxes and property taxes, things like that, getting those down, as well as Brother Bill's Helping Hand that has, a food pantry and things like that. So we have a lot of partners. And what's nice about, that I've been now with Readers to Leaders for about 14 years is, you just text the person, I can text the person I know there. But it's great because we really have strong and personal connections with our partners, where our team or myself, we can go and we can help connect the families to resources. The schools are also incredible sources for support and resources. They often have parent liaisons, they often have folks working with the parents, a lot of nonprofit and community partners. And so I really do think teachers are on the front line of so many things as well. And we need to partner with our teachers and with our principals to make sure that if we hear something, we're sharing with them and we're kind of in community with them and supporting. We have a Reading Buddies program at some of our schools, and sometimes kids will disclose information to a volunteer or in a one-on-one situation that they may not tell the teacher. So we
Right.
do work with our volunteers and our instructors to assist when that happens. And sometimes kids, it's like kids say the darndest things. Yep, that's true. You never know when a child will share something. And of course, we've all been trained in reporting and in assisting when children are, in harm's way. But
Mhm.
if it comes down to resources, then I really do feel like we have a great network of partners and we can lean on as we learn about those things.
Yeah, that's great. I can see that if a child has really formed a bond with a tutor and feels safe with a tutor, they may say something in passing like, "Oh, I overheard mom saying that we have to move." That I can see, that being valuable information for you to know and kind of figure out how to support that family and keep the child, in tutoring on a consistent basis.
Definitely. And we have this group family reading cohort, but we've started a parent advisory group for after school. We've done some focus groups, and we're trying to learn what do the parents need and what can we bring in terms of maybe it's not us, but it's a community partner, right? And so whether that's financial literacy or someone, we have had Habitat come over, like sort of, again, it's easy. It's like let's walk 2 doors down. And
Yeah.
share, a program with our families. And so I think it's all about working together when we hear things like that and making sure that we are providing access and an entry to our families to plug into these groups that can be a support in the
Mhm.
community.
That's great. And I want to be cognizant of time and begin to wind down this conversation. But Norma, clearly I could talk to you for much longer than 30 minutes. But you mentioned how you are co-locating with Dallas Habitat for Humanity and how valuable that has been for you to deal with these very complex and interconnected issues. And it got me thinking about just this broader issue of coalition building. And I know Readers to Leaders is involved in a number of coalitions, including the Dallas Housing Coalition. And what have you noticed about the importance of individuals and organizations working in coalitions with one another?
Definitely. So we are part of a lot of coalitions. Part of it is from being in the West Dallas area. So we've had a lot of, I would say, collective impact models and work here over the past 14 years. We're in one with several early literacy groups called Read Up. And I think really it boils down to, you've got strength in numbers. When you have people coming together, there's a lot that can be done when you have a more streamlined partnership. So for example, with the Read Up, which is the early literacy group, we work with Dallas ISD as a group. So rather than 4 different nonprofits having a call with Dallas ISD early learning or different folks that we work with, we can have one call a month where we go through some of the challenges or some of the questions that we may have or clarify. And it's very logistical, or we might be talking about data or creating a culture of continuous improvement. How is the tutoring helping the kids? Where do we still need to grow that service? What can we do to be a better partner? All those kind of things. But it really does come down to trying to be efficient and streamline what we're doing, and also advocacy. Obviously advocacy is a huge part of what the Dallas Housing Coalition is doing. We do that as well in the education space, and it's more voices kind of come together. It can be hard because there's a lot of noise out there, right, about work and about this topic. I think specifically now in the past couple months in Dallas. So we have to support each other and come together and kind of put a stake in the ground on what we believe and why we believe it. And through the power of working together and being a support when times get hard, I think that can make that process move more smoothly. Particularly when you can have folks on either side of an issue or topic and things can get tough. So I think that nonprofit folks, we stick together. We have a strong community, our leaders and our teams, and we're ultimately here to build a more equitable Dallas, and we all do that through our work daily, but we can strengthen that together.
I love that. And just a final question for you before we wrap up. Any final words that you'd like to share with our viewers today? Really about anything. If there are any community development projects that you have on the horizon that you'd like to share, or any parting thoughts on just all the issues we've talked about today concerning literacy, housing stability, instability, or coalition building. The final words are yours.
Yeah, definitely. So probably folks on this call are involved in their communities already, but right, I think it's just what's our role to play? I mean, we all have, folks are busy and there's a lot going on and a lot of different places where we can put our energy, but I think finding what you're passionate about, these are complex and issues, and education, housing, health, they all really do come together in the end. And so I think figuring out where you plug in and where you can give back. I always joke, you hear about when you retire, sometimes if people aren't out and social and doing things that can, that's how I'm like, gosh, when I retire, I get to join more things and do more things, and I get to go to City Hall every day or whatever I want to do, right? In terms of moving things forward or being plugged into my community. And, I can't always do that every day in the job that I have. It's a big job, right? Being a CEO has a lot of responsibility, and I love it. But I think that no matter where we are in life and what season we are in life, let's choose to be involved in what moves us and where we can make a difference in it. And I think there's an opportunity here in the Dallas Housing Coalition to do that. And whether that's, going to speak, going to support, sharing a post, it's what works for you in terms of how to be an ally. So I just, offer it to folks to do that. And if it comes to literacy, come to R2L. I welcome anyone to come visit us. We have reading buddies. We have one-time volunteer ops for like corporate and other kind of groups, and we do tours quite a bit. So if literacy is something that moves you, please reach out to me, and I would love to show you around and give you more information.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Norma, for joining us this morning and sharing your unique and very valuable perspectives of us about the intersection between literacy and housing instability. And so before we sign off today, for our viewers, I want to encourage you to follow the Dallas Housing Coalition on all its social media channels for updates on how you can get involved in the work of the Dallas Housing Coalition, and also stay connected with our Housing for All webinar series. While you're at it, please do visit the Dallas Housing Coalition at its website, dallashousingcoalition.com, to learn more about our member organizations like Readers to Leaders, and join the coalition at the site if you're not already a member. And finally, please plan to buy tickets and attend Dallas Housing Coalition's inaugural Housing Summit. That Housing Summit will be on Thursday, November 21st from 11:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. at Bill J. Priest Center in Dallas. You can RSVP and purchase your ticket at the Dallas Housing Coalition website. And again, that website address is dallashousingcoalition.com. Thank you, all of you, for tuning in to another episode of our Housing for All webinar series, where we discuss whether Dallas